Welcome to the Whole Life Transformation Summit. I am Kedarji, and I am your host for the summit. And we are here today with Ashana. Ashana is one of the premier music artists, healing music artists, and new age vocalists of our time, weaving together soaring angelic vocals and the celestial sound of crystal bowl singing and crystal singing bowls. Ashana has received widespread international acclaim for her recordings. She is also a lifelong student of yoga. You can read her full bio on this page. Today, she's going to be talking to us about healing sound modalities, transcendent, vibrational, energy-based healing for well-being. Welcome, Ashana. Thank you so much for appearing on our summit.
Oh, thank you, Kedarji. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You look great. You've got those wonderful bowls behind you. The
Yeah, they're all
so
here.
strong. Yeah. So here we go. So first thing that I know viewers are thinking, and sometimes I think this also, with someone of such great artistry as you, the first question usually is, did you grow up in a musical household?
Well, the answer to that is sort of. It was very much a more of a listening experience in our household than it was an active playing experience. My dad was he played the accordion and he played the guitar. My mom sang in the local church choir. My sister sang in the local church choir. But there was not any big emphasis on learning an instrument or playing an instrument or family playing together. But we had a lot of music in the household because my dad was really quite passionate about classical music and Russian Orthodox music specifically, because that was his background. And as it so happens, my grandfather was part of the first group of people that started the St. Michael's Russian Orthodox Church, and he was the choir director there. And then my grandmother on my mother's side was part of a small amateur singing group called the Three Chickadees. And I think that I'm more like the chickadee than the choir director. Although I have been a choir director. I was a choir director for many years in my previous life.
So, you know, it's an interesting connection that we also have, because St. Michael's Russian Orthodox Church, Lower East Side. So I have been in and out of that church several times in my former life, so to speak, when I had a musical career.
Oh my God.
And
that is amazing.
And I remember that church so well. I did 3 seasons of Christmas performances as part of a string ensemble at that church. And I used to go back and I used to sit and meditate and pray in there. It's a really wonderful space. And so it's just, you know, they say that coincidences are God's way of remaining anonymous. And so,
you know, I don't think I've ever met anybody that knows about St. Michael till just now.
Yes, we used to call it St. Mike's. We used to say, let's go hang out with the Russians.
Oh my God.
Go and hang out, but we performed. I was part of an ensemble, and we had performances. The church was full. Christmas, we had a great time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So now you have a wonderful and also a very unique voice. Where did you get your vocal training from?
I've received my vocal training in many different layers. Let me just put it that way. I loved singing from pretty much ever since I can remember. And so I began singing when I was a young girl, just for pleasure and fun. It wasn't anything that I wanted to do, but I begged my mother to let me join the choir at church, because I love the fact that they were in those like blue robes with the silver thingies and the music that was coming out, but it wasn't to be because I wasn't old enough. So I was turned down, and I finally got my first chance to start singing when I taught myself how to play guitar, and then mom sent me for lessons, and I began writing my own songs when I was 10 years old and singing and doing little concerts at church. And that was sort of the start of it. I eventually went to college. I went to the Mannes College of Music, a conservatory in New York City that's still very much thriving
Manus is a
to
great
this
school.
day.
Yeah.
It's a great school. It was a great school. I had an amazing education there. And my first voice teacher, actually, no, it was my third voice teacher was there. I started singing, studying singing when I was 16 years old, and went to conservatory when I was about 18. Um, so I had 4 years at Mannes, and I had a very in-depth classical training, both in school academically and and professionally, in singing with the early music scene in New York City. So did you ever see the series on Netflix called Mozart in the Jungle?
Yes, as a matter of
Okay,
fact.
so I lived that. That was like seriously that, and when and the same people that she talks about in the book, I mean, I was aware of them, or I knew them. I
Mm,
mean, it was a very small classical music scene in the city, and I definitely was connected either directly or peripherally in all of that. And I had a tremendous training at that time, but there was something that it was not satisfying to me. It you know, there was a level of perfectionism that had to be applied, and emotionally I was not prepared. I did not have um, the emotional development, the skill set to handle the intensity of that of that environment. And so I walked away from it. I walked away from it, and I started exploring other avenues, um, through through jazz, through pop, through gospel, through children's music. I just started growing and evolving in different directions and exploring. I mean, really, the whole time I was looking for myself,
yeah.
and I didn't realize that I was looking for my voice. I was still continuing to write songs. I was recording by this time, but nothing was cohesive. I mean, I recorded some amazing songs actually back during that exploratory period, but never did anything with them. They're really fun. So, but you know, they just sit in my closet, kind of taking up space right now, but they were amazing experiences. And I think not I think, but the biggest turnaround came when after I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, which was in 1996. And I had two incredible teachers, music teachers. I met a piano teacher, a keyboard teacher that I worked with for a few years, and he shifted my whole perspective on listening and improvisation and songwriting. That was an entirely different universe that he helped me access. And then I met my voice teacher for life. She passed in 2014, but I spent about 9 years with her, from 2005 to 2014. I worked with her very in depth, and her name was Alana Joan Cara, and she changed my life. She changed my life as a singer. That I have no way that I can even imagine, other than just being able to do what I do and share that gift with others, to thank her for what she gave me as an artist, as a human being. So I don't know, it's that
It's,
help.
no, it's so really, it's really important. It's interesting. I was also classically trained, um, violin performance conducting with piano as a
Oh,
minor.
wow.
And then, but again, as you just shared something interesting, and it was also my experience, that I felt very confined for some reason in just classical.
Yeah.
And so when I moved into jazz, and then moved into world music, that changed both
Yep.
my inner experience and, of course, my experience of what music is. It became more of a relationship to evolve, as
Yes.
you were sharing. And then it's so important, and thank God you had a vocal teacher, a mentor who also had an impact per se on your well-being, on your life view. And I came into that with Barry Harris, great jazz musician, Clifford Jordan,
Yeah.
and Manny Subramaniam. So Manny Subramaniam, who's L.
Yeah.
Subramaniam, who is the great Indian classical violinist.
Yes. Yes, I
I
know
had
his
the
name
great
well.
privilege of studying Indian classical with him on the violin. And so these people also, it wasn't just that they were teaching me music, there was something else they were giving me.
Yep. Yes. My voice teacher actually, her spiritual mentor, God, what was his name? John, I can't remember his last name, John's last name, but he was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda.
Mm.
And my voice teacher, Alana, was a devoted student of Yogananda's. I mean, devoted. And she was a crazy spiritual medium in her own right. Um, and her healing work and prayer work were profound. And I was a recipient of a lot of that prayer work. You know, there was so much grace in that relationship, you know, and there was so much healing that I had to do to let my voice out and to be able to sing and to move past tremendous layers of fear as a singer. And I can't even tell you the number of times when I would be standing in front of her and she would have her hand on my either my heart, or she'd have her hand on my solar plexus, and she'd be running this juju through her palm and changing colors, and I knew something was going on. I mean, it was like you'd have to be like, you know, you'd have to be like sound asleep to not know that what was happening is that you were being the recipient of a massive divine download of pranic energy and healing in there. And, you know, she would like place her hand and then she would say, you know, all right, sweetheart, just sing this note. And I would open my mouth and then I would start sobbing. And, you know, this clearing and release of, you know, years and years. You know, I mean, as a classical singer, I had imposed so many restrictions on myself, my posture, my breathing, my, you know, the self-judgment and self-condemnation. Oh, this sound is good, this sound is bad. And she, God bless her, I mean, oh my God, she gave me, you know, a big part of my life back, and in holding, not just holding space, but gently stripping away, you know, all of those pieces one by one by one. And she taught me so well that I, when I finished with her and I recorded like all the albums that I recorded up until 2014 were all under her guidance. And then the things that we're getting ready to come out with this year, these are all, this is the next evolution of my sound, just taking the next step and letting go even more of of um, of any constriction of having to sing in a classical way with those restrictions, self-imposed restrictions. And the funny thing about it is that I'm doing some remedial study again on my voice. I mean, I just don't think you ever stop. I can't stop. And there were things about my singing recently that I'm like, I need to work on this. I really need to work on this. And so I began studying with somebody different, who's taking it to a complete other level of freedom. And so when I've been going back to some of the classical pieces, because I love Hildegard von Bingen and I've always loved singing those Hildegard antiphons, and just realizing that there's a growing new level of just letting go and letting go and letting go. So I don't know.
It's
I don't think you ever stop.
no, particularly not on the part of surrender.
Exactly.
The letting go, the surrender, there's so much magic in that. So this is a very good segue. So now just
Sure.
let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Tell us how you first became involved with music as a healing art. Was that a conscious decision, or was that just part of the evolution that you've been describing?
It was part of the evolution. I never ever called myself a sound healer. And when people would suggest that, I bristled. And in fact, my husband, when we first met, and he said, you're really a sound healer. And I was just like, I am not. He loves to tell this story because he loves to like show people my indignation. And I would go, I'm a musician, I'm a singer, I'm an artist. I was oh my God. When I listen, I hear myself, 10, 15 years ago talking about that. And I want to go, oh God, Ashana. There's so much growing that had to happen. And, I feel blessed because I am a musician and I am an artist and I am also a sound healer. It's taken me a long time to integrate and love all of them,
Mm.
you know?
I you reminded me of an old story. I once heard Bhimsen Joshi, who was a really great Indian classical vocal artist, who came to perform for my own spiritual guru many, many years ago in his ashram, who was such a, and I used that mantra surrender for a reason. It was so clear that he was so surrendered to the pulse or vibration of the divine pulsing through his being. He gave people shivers when he sang.
Yes.
They said, now Bhimsen Joshi is going to perform for you. And he would smile. And I got to know him a little bit because he came several times. And then he would wink at me and he would just say, to God be the glory, and start
Oh,
singing. And people had really incredible movements of energy. And so my experience, for example, you are, to my knowledge, the only singer who has recorded the Lord's Prayer in Aramaic. That's a CD of yours that I really love.
no, there are
But
many actually.
are there?
Oh yeah,
Well,
there
but
are
I
many.
don't know if there are many that go beyond the words to the experience. And so there was so much power when I heard you sing that. And I think that's what real musical artistry is about, that it has to heal. If it's music that's shared in love,
Yes,
love manifesting as sound.
yes.
And I think there are very few artists who can move people in that way. And in my experience, you're one of them. So
Well, thank you. I actually think that there are quite a few artists out there that move people. Um, and some of them we know of, and some of them you might find down at your local church or your local,
sure,
you know,
it's a good point.
local organization. I think music is so healing and so powerful. When we talk about like sound healing now these days, it's quite the thing that's trending right now. But sound healing has been around for thousands of years. It's so funny that the United States, with a certain level of hubris, you know, um, states, well, now we're doing sound healing. Like, the Vedas were doing sound healing by 7,000 years ago.
Yeah, Samaveda. Yeah.
And different indigenous cultures have been doing sound healing for, millennia, with drumming and vocalizations and chanting, and that is how we functioned as a collective to unify our spirits, to create a sense of oneness or focus or intention or healing prayer. You know, I have a plaque up in my music room. I mean, this is my ballroom. I actually have a room with my piano, and it says "Singing is praying twice." You know,
Ah, wonderful.
which I love that. I mean, and I look at it and I remember it every time I open my mouth or try to. Uh,
Singing is praying
Singing is
twice.
praying twice.
Ah,
Singing is praying twice. You know, so like there are musicians and artists that are doing music everywhere now, and you can have incredible experiences listening to them. And because there's so many, there are artists and musicians that are right for everybody, you
mm,
know. And there's power and really intense shakti
mm.
inside music that can change and make a positive difference, or not positive difference, because it works both ways. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So brings me to my next question. Why
Yeah.
crystal bowls? How did you get started in performing with crystal bowls?
Well, there's kind of the story which I'm happy to share with you about. You know, when the first bowl landed in my life, as I was living in Espanola, New Mexico, and a spiritual mentor of mine called me up on the phone and said, "Have you ever heard of crystal singing bowls?" I said, "No." She goes, "Well, these are right up your alley." And she had access to one, and she goes, "You want me to order it for you?" And I said yes immediately, because I just didn't question it. And she did. And so 3 weeks later, this 14-inch classic frosted, this is the heavy white ones, appeared on my doorstep in a double box, like filled with peanuts. And I pulled the bowl out of the box. I didn't know anything about bowls, never even seen one played. You know, I didn't even scan the instructions, you know, that came in the bag. I picked up the mallet. I tapped the side of the bowl. I heard the sound and I burst into tears. I started sobbing. And the very first thought that came into my mind instantly was that light had come to live in my house. And
Wow.
and the second thought that I had was, one day I'm going to put these into music.
Mm,
And that it took, that was in 1999. It took 6 years, until I met Thomas Barkey. And who some of your listeners, if they're in the yoga world, may know of
yeah.
his work with. He's one of the top producers of sacred vocal chant music in the world. And I met him through his connection with Sanatam Kaur.
Mm,
And that story alone about he and I meeting and coming to do what we've done is miraculous. That was in its own right incredible. And Thomas and I have been working together 15 years. And the moment we were in the studio together, it took us about 3 days for the energy to kind of settle, until I got to that point where I was like, God, I have to like let go of, and we have to collaborate together. I just kept listening to my inner guidance, just was saying, no, this isn't just about you and the bowls. It's not about you and the bowls. It's about the music. It's about the music that you and Thomas are going to create. So I said, I can't do it like this anymore. We've got to. I came here to collaborate with you. And he looks at me and he goes, great, what key? I said, D flat. He said, great, let's go. And an hour later, we'd written Ave Maria. It was like that fast.
mm.
It was so quick. And we've been like that ever since. And we haven't stopped working together. We've got 5 new projects coming out, 3 of them probably this year. And 2, if we can get out this year, we will. And if we can't, we'll release them in 2021. And then a line of projects that are just waiting at the door to get started.
How
So
wonderful.
yeah, it's a miracle to me. Grace, miracle.
grace. Oh, what grace. So for our viewers, we've got a special surprise for you. We're going to cut away now to a video clip of a special performance offered by Ashana, and then we'll be right back after the performance. Enjoy. So, Ashana, what is crystalline sound healing and how does it work? How does it heal?
That's a big question because there are many components for in order to answer that clearly. So let me take them piece by piece, and then what we'll see is that they begin to integrate together. So first of all, let's look at the crystal in a crystal singing bowl. Most crystal singing bowls are made of 99.992% pure gem silica, which is crystal. And then we have some new crystal singing bowls called the super grades that are made of 100% pure quartz crystal. So what are the properties of quartz crystal? So properties of quartz crystal are to amplify energy, to transmit energy, and to store energy. Okay, so let's just take that little bit and kind of tuck it to the side right now so that we have a little bit of an understanding about the properties of crystal. Now let's look at sound. So nature's greatest conductor of sound. So most people, if you ask them that question, they'll say, "Oh, well, air must be the greatest conductor of sound because, we hear and it goes through the air, the airwaves." But that's actually not true. The greatest conductor of sound is water. That's why you have the ability of the fish, the dolphins, the whales, those beings in water. They can communicate with each other up to 225 miles down into the ocean. This is why the sonic testing is devastating to the marine communities living in our oceans. But air, for example, can only transmit sound frequencies or sound waves up to about 5 miles. It's really different than the 225 miles. Okay, so let's just take that little piece and we'll just tuck it to the side, right? Our bodies are made up of 70 to 80% water. Now, when we take a sound frequency and we play it or vibrate it either on or near or around a body, the sound and the vibrations of that are literally carried through the fluids of our body, and the information on that sound is delivered into every cell, every atom, every molecule, into the bones, into the physical matter, into the emotional matter, into the mental body. So it's not only delivering to all of the energetic bodies, the causal bodies, the subtle bodies, the emotional body, the mental body, but it's also delivering directly into the physical. Now, there are historically specific notes or frequencies of sound that have a direct impact on the chakra system in the physical and the etheric bodies. And there are traditionally particular notes that are associated with helping to cleanse, clear, and balance the energy of the chakras. Now, insofar as crystal singing bowls go, in my own personal experience, because of the addition of what we call harmonics in the sound, and the harmonics are the additional notes that you hear that add to the fullness of the timbre of the sound, not just the fundamental pitch, but we have these additional notes that we hear very, very faintly in the distance. And sometimes you don't even need to you don't hear them at all, but they're there. But crystal singing bowls are instruments that are rich with harmonics, rich
The overtones, huh?
with harmonics and overtones. And particularly when you're playing bowls in series or you're building sonic beds of sound, you're working with in my own personal experience, multiple activation and balancing, clearing, opening for chakra energies. And so you have the sound of the bowls that are being carried on the physical, the sound of the bowls that are being carried energetically into the energy bodies and into the light body. You have the balancing of the chakras, and this is just like for a start. There's all other pieces that come into play here depending on the kind of crystal singing bowls that you're working with. The kind of bowls that I play are the alchemy, the master alchemy, and the super grade bowls that are made by a company called Crystal Tones. And these have been infused and overlaid with precious gemstones, minerals, and metals. You take all of that, and then when you're working with crystalline structure, you are amplifying, you are transmitting what has been stored in the bowls directly into the system. So it becomes almost, and here that's a big, long explanation, basically coming to this point, it's very similar to a level of homeopathic sonic healing, vibrational healing.
Yes, and I'm glad you took the long route because you've actually described the science behind it, which I think is really important for people to understand because
Yes,
there is a science behind it,
very much so.
and you've
Very
just described it. And then also the quality of the bowl does matter.
The quality of the bowl is huge. You know, there are bowls that are coming in right now that are of poor quality, and and basically the quality of bowls that is poor have quite a bit of fractures. You know, the manufacturers have cut corners in the production process, and so the bowls tend to fracture more. They hold internal fractures that you can't quite see and you can't quite hear yet, which is compromising the quality of the sound. The bowls that I play are just like superb, and you're not dealing with that level at all inside of the manufacturing process, and plus the intention of the company and what is being transmitted through the product is huge. It makes a tremendous difference as opposed to something coming from a manufacturer that's just cranking out instruments because supply and demand makes it look like a good thing.
Very important point.
Yeah,
So now you run a crystal bowl mastery program, and you
I do.
also do crystalline sound healing retreats. Can you
I
tell
do.
us just a little bit about those?
Oh, well, Crystal Bowl Mastery levels 1 and 2 is designed for my students and my clients, for energy healers, yoga teachers, people who want to play bowls, either for themselves on deeper levels or to play as far as to integrate in their own sound healing offerings or energy healing offerings. When I first started playing crystal singing bowls, there were no there was no training because nobody else was playing bowls. Pretty much, there weren't a whole lot of people out there doing that, and nobody was talking about how to do it. I mean, really, you got a bunch of directions in a box and a few pieces of paper and said, oh, and this is what you do, and you're off. Mazel tov, go with my blessings. And oh my God, I made so many mistakes with my bowls. I can't even begin to tell you how many mistakes I made in terms of um, how I played, when I played, what I was doing while I was playing. There was a lot. And did I create some harm when I played bowls? Yes, I did, out of my own ignorance and also out of my own arrogance. So I had a lot to learn when I was starting. I'm not that I don't have a lot to learn now. I mean, really. But I started these trainings a few years ago, constantly being asked by my clients, by my students, please, we want to go deeper. We want to take this deeper. We want to be able to do what you do and understand what you understand so we can take it to the next level. And people calling me or writing to me and saying, I know there's more than what I'm doing and I don't know how to get there. And, so in my trainings, I probably just knocked off 10 years of what you have to do as far as learning to play bowls. And so I created Crystal Bowl Mastery just for that. It's not just a training about bowls. It's not about technique, although there is technique. It is about presence. It is about learning to be with yourself. It is about very deep levels of listening. It is a spiritual retreat for the students that come. It is a healing retreat for the students that come. If you are ready to take a tremendous leap in consciousness, this is some pretty powerful work to do. It will bring you into a relationship with sound and vibrational healing that is quite deep and quite profound. So if you're ready for that, it's an amazing course to take.
Great. So I'm coming to my last question, and let me preface it in this way. I spent a lot of time, had the privilege, I should say, of crossing paths with some really great jazz icons like Miles Davis, Satchmo, Louis Armstrong. And I'm going to use Miles and Satchmo just as an example. Both had incredible quality trumpets that they played. Beautiful instruments, well crafted personally for them. But the beings who played them were two decisively different beings. Miles, who I got to know, great human being, lots of vices, lots of trauma, lots of, for lack of a better mantra in this moment, inner demons. Satchmo was always joyous, always in a state of peace for the most part whenever I encountered him, always looking to experience joy. Two different beings, and therefore, in my experience, Satchmo and Miles played some of the very same tunes, but had an entirely different impact on their audiences when they played them.
Exactly.
Having said that, I have learned that you have a Gnostic mantra practice that I'm sure must impact your offering in healing musical arts. Could you share with us a little bit about that and its impact on your own well-being and also on your artistry?
Well, I was privileged, really privileged. I've been very privileged to study Sanskrit mantra with Russell Paul and to be part of his Sri Vidya tantric training. And this, I'll just give you an example. And I was in meditation at the beginning of this year. I asked in prayer, in meditation, I wanted a very clear message for what this year was going to look like for me. And I didn't realize until, we've been going through what we've been going through now collectively, how prescient that was. I heard clairaudiently three things. I heard steady your mind. Then I heard steady your breath. And then I heard study your mantra. And it was the voice of one of my teachers, one of my spiritual teachers. And I mean, she might as well have been standing in the room with me, talking to me.
Isn't
It
that
was
so
like,
great when that happens?
oh God, it's
When your
not the kind
spiritual
of thing.
guru appears to you and says, hey.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, I can count on one hand the number of times that I've had those messages from her.
Mm.
And it was really clear. And she was the one who sent me in a dream to go and study with Russell.
Mm.
So your question was, it's like, how does that mantric practice change or impact the quality of what I'm doing? One of the things that I'm learning from Russell, there are actually a couple of things that I'm learning from him. Oh, God, do you have like an hour or two we can really talk about this?
We'll have to schedule another interview for this topic.
The thing about it is, in the Sri Vidya Tantra, as I'm learning it, and the way that I'm being taught this, I'm for the very first time seeing a transparent architectural structure of consciousness that makes complete sense to me. And I have seen that metaphorically in many of the great teachings, like, for example, in the first in the pauris of Japji, which are the first great Sikh scriptures, and it's the very first few pages of the Sri Guru Granth Sahib from the sacred Sikh scriptures. But Guru Nanak, who is the father of
Nanak Dev,
Guru
my
Nanak Dev,
spiritual guru, talks about
exactly.
him all the time.
Well, he like mapped out
Mm.
the architectural structures.
Indeed, he did.
Well,
Yes.
and in this amazingly gorgeous poetry,
Mm.
right? And it was beautiful, and it was metaphorical, and all of that. But it wasn't until my study of Sri Vidya and Russell's bringing in the elements of Western psychology inside the entire mix that I began to see the metaphorical take very tangible shape. And then on the side of the mantra, to actually begin to appreciate the essence of all of those, not all of those, but the essence of sound as the building blocks of creation. So one of the practices that I'm learning in the work that I'm studying now, in the body of work that I'm studying now, is a practice called nyasa, whereas the placement of specific sounds in the subtle body, and it's the development of the sound body.
Part of the
And
ancient practice of mantra yoga as it applies to well-being and upliftment and the expansion of spiritual awareness. Nyasa.
yes,
So
yes,
great.
nyasa, and very specific. Working with the Sanskrit alphabet,
Yes.
and placing the sounds on the body, around the body, and yet each one of those, like meaning form, I believe it means, meaning bliss, so every single sound in these 54 sounds that we have is placed on the body, and it's placed in the etheric body, and you become a vibrating container of consciousness. It is completely reorienting, as a singer, as a musician, as a human. It's reorienting both my nervous system, is deepening my awareness of the impact of sound and vibration on not just my own well-being, but on everybody's. It's opening doors in consciousness to a more intimate and personal relationship with the divine feminine and the divine masculine. It's strengthening my voice in ways that surprise me. Um, it it is broadening, and this is probably the deepest place, is that it's broadening my ability to open to states of consciousness, because now it's not just metaphorical. I feel so blessed to have a teacher who's literally drawing out the intricacies of those relationships and spelling them out so that I can go, oh, I get it. That's how that works. So it's not just like, it's not this, it's not limited by a more, and I mean no offense to anybody. So this is just, if I inadvertently offend somebody by saying this, it is only my, please forgive me, because it's my ignorance at not finding better language to articulate what I'm about to say. But it's sometimes I have felt limited by the bhakti relationship when I really needed more jnana. I needed more wisdom. I needed more clarity. I needed a deeper level of understanding instead of just going, open your heart and let God in. It was, I had to know what God, goddess, divine is in the first place. And don't expect me to open my heart to any of that in faith, because I really need to understand this relationship, you know, and that was me, that's Ashana. I think I lived enough lifetimes as a bhakti, otherwise I couldn't sing the way I sing. I'm pretty sure about that. But I was missing this kind of depth of understanding. And so when it started coming in the training that I've been doing with Russell, I could practically cry, because it was like, oh, finally, 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 I'm beginning to understand beyond just faith-based learning.
Well, yeah, you're
And
understanding the science of it, and that's very important. And so
yeah,
let me ask you a question. Just forgive me for interrupting, but
no, please.
isn't it all your experience? Because then you said you were sobbing and you were crying. Isn't it also your experience that as you increase your jnana, and for viewers who don't know what that means, that's the knowledge part, the science behind, in this case, healing mantras, the science behind nyasa, that increases, doesn't that give rise within you to more bhakti?
Absolutely. And because now for me, the bhakti is becoming authentic.
Yeah, right, because
So
you know the science.
it's huge. It's not just this, oh, I love God, especially when back in my mind, yeah, remember, I mean, you don't have to remember, but I'm going to share with you, like, I grew up in a Christian household, so we were at church from day one, and there was like years and years and years and years of church, and then I became a church musician, and I spent 40 years as a church musician, and all of this. And I'm going to clue you into something. Inside of all of that time, I didn't have a clue what the divine was. I didn't have a clue. It was, and I lived in that space. The connection for me in terms of my singing for most of that part of my life, and this is before I began singing with bowls and mantra and chanting and all of that, as that began changing, but most of that time was emotion based, you know then it began changing. My consciousness began changing. My consciousness began expanding. My awareness began expanding. My depth of presence. So to go back to your question, we have Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis. I think that what's happening for me is is that I'm growing more full.
Mm.
And the more full that I become, the more presence, the more I'm becoming increasingly more present and more able to become absorbed in sound, then the more direct and authentic the sound is becoming that comes through me. And you know, as I get older and my voice begins changing and deepening and growing, um, it's an interesting process as you go through this, as I'm going through this time, is that I care less what you think about how I sound, because it's more about how true it is and much less about how beautiful some concept in my mind thinks it needs to be.
Mm. You lose yourself in it completely without being concerned about the outcome or the impact.
Yeah,
Pure vessel.
yeah.
Wonderful. We have been speaking with Ashana, world-renowned musical healing artist. Be sure, be sure on this page that you click through on the link to her website, follow the steps to claim your free gift. Ashana is providing you with a free MP3 download of her album, Jewels of Silence.
Oh, we're doing that for a certain number of people. So for the first for the first, I think it is 25 or 50 people who sign up,
Okay,
we're going to give you the free download. Everybody else, if you missed that, you will absolutely get a free song, and we'll be giving you soul merch from Jewels of Silence.
thanks for clarifying. So
Don't worry, it's okay.
very good. Ashana, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed for our Whole Life Transformation Summit,
Thank
and
you.
also for opening up so much about your journey. It's so, so great.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Ashana.
Thank you so much, Kedarji. Thank you.